Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I do a little bit of AV too. I'm just kidding. Thank you guys. All right. I'm going to time myself because I have a tendency to talk a lot. All right, so first of all, thank you all for being here today. I think it's really encouraging that this many people showed up for a conversation about character. That on its own is a really positive idea, so thank you very much. Thank you to Scott and everyone at the NSCA for making this possible. I remember the first conference I came to about 5 years ago, how meaningful that was to me in my professional development, and I feel super honored to be here up on stage. We're going to talk today about something called character by design. And we're going to end up giving out strategies probably toward the back end of this presentation, but what we're going to do more than anything today is become really self-aware about the way that we think and the environments that we cultivate. The Good Athlete Project is a nonprofit that we actually came up with a couple years ago, whose mission it is essentially to help students realize their potential through athletics. We'll talk more about that as well. But you can follow us at Coach for Kindness, shameless plug for Instagram followers. We're going to start by analyzing some language, because I think language is essential to the cultivation of positive environments. Just by show of hands, who's heard this sort of sports cliche before? Sports teach life lessons. I would say it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. Sports teach life lessons, and that's a myth, okay? And I start conversations like that sometimes because it's semi-provocative, but it's also the honest truth. No one playing football is better just because they're playing football. No one playing basketball alone is learning life lessons necessarily. The truth of the matter is, intentional teachers and coaches use sports as a platform to teach life lessons. And I think it's a really important distinction. It puts ownership back on us, okay, and doesn't leave too much to the abstract concept of sport as a life lesson teacher. Another one is sports don't build character, they reveal it. This has become an especially poignant one in my life recently. I hear things all the time in the sports setting. We've traveled the world doing this work. Things like, that dog won't hunt, or that kid doesn't have it. And it's just like, if we think about what we are, educators, that kind of mindset just can't happen. And let me also say this. I'm not trying to point at anyone. I'm not trying to call out anyone in today's conversation. I'm just trying to look accurately at these situations, because I think we've probably all been guilty of some version of this at some point. He or she just doesn't have it. But the line, sports don't build character, they reveal it, it's a myth, because the truth is, intentional teachers and coaches teach for character, right? They cultivate environments accordingly. They acknowledge that as one of the purposes of them being in the environments in which they were chosen to be in, and they coach for that. They make sure that that's at the top of their aim, because if you're a coach, you're an educator, and there's no getting around that, okay? Coaches are educators. The weight room is your classroom. It's the absolute, undeniable truth. You're an educator in the most powerful learning environment that exists. I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. As Joel mentioned, I went off and studied at Harvard for one of my degrees. The title of the degree was Human Development and Psychology. The focus, I took a special interest in cognitive neuroscience for a variety of reasons. But I was sitting in a classroom. It was my first neuroscience class. The professor was a guy named Todd Rose, who's actually a really interesting guy. Wrote a book called The End of Average. Worth looking up if you're interested. But I was sitting in Todd's class, and we were on a unit about attention. Essentially, what called the brain into action, what made it sticky and receptive to new information, what made it want to encode new information, and it was pretty much everything that happens in sports, right? And I obviously had a bias going into this, but as I was reading through all the literature, I was like, well, yeah, that's inherent in sports. This happens all the time. Right? If we could create the perfect learning environment through the lens of cognitive neuroscience, it'd be one that included novelty and cooperation and purpose and group momentum and something called exercise-induced neural enhancement, which I would be more than willing to give an entire presentation on. Increased blood flow, full nervous system activation, and powerful models and motivators. Obviously, that's you. Now, we could talk about this from the neurobiological perspective, if anyone was so inclined, but I think it's kind of an easy thing to understand. Nobody shows up for history class, no offense to history teachers, but nobody shows up for history class shaking with excitement, okay? No one is broken down into tears because it was the last game they'd ever play with their high school friends after a bio class. And again, like I'm a little bit of a nerd. I do like to study, so I'm not putting down those environments. I'm fully in support of all the academic pursuits, but it's true that it's just an undeniably unique learning platform that we all have the privilege of being involved in. So as we enter that platform, I think it's really important to identify what our purpose is, right? There's a lot of potential. What are we going to do with that potential? The first distinction I'm going to make is that there is a difference in the athlete's purpose for being in the room and ours. And if we do this thing right, they will overlap. By the way, I hope you guys noticed the animations on that slide because it took me about 25 minutes. So I hope it goes appreciated. But the athlete purpose and the educator purpose are sometimes different, but they can align if we do this thing the right way. Okay? Just for kind of a working model of purpose or mission, this is the one of the Good Athlete Project. It's our anchor mission. It's to help students realize their potential through athletics. And the reason we keep it fairly broad is because it looks different on every site that we're at, right? It looks different in Oakland than it does in Boston. It looks different from the north side of Chicago to the south. It looks different in Ireland than it looks like in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It looks different on every site. But if we keep that as our purpose, as our mission, to help all students realize their potential through athletics, then we can bounce ideas off of it and we're moving down a good path. Another thing to recognize is that if you are a coach, if you are an educator, you are a motivator by trade. You can't get around that, right? And the reason I say that, whether you consider yourself a motivator or not, is you provide people with a motive to do something. The definition of a motivator, to provide someone with a motive to do something. That's you, right? And this is especially important because we do have to answer this question for kids. He is hilarious, I know. We have to answer this question for kids, though, because what we're doing in part is we are lighting the light at the end of the tunnel that we're asking people to walk through, right? So we have to start with that. We have to start with that light. Otherwise, what's the point? What is the motivation to trudge through that tunnel that we talk about? And I want you to think about this, too. I want you to think about the difference between purpose, like the one we're talking about, and hype, okay? And I hear some laughing. Does everyone know who Flavor Flav is? The hype man for Public Enemy? Listen, I don't mean to knock him. And here's the truth. I crank the music up too, right? I lose my voice yelling. I want to hype the place up. I want to bring some energy to a room when I'm in it, all right? That's a truth of me in the weight room and our entire staff. But picture this. Picture Flavor Flav. Picture yourself in an audience at a Public Enemy concert. You show up in Flavor Flav. The music's slowly starting to build. The lights start to grow. He's got chains and crowns or whatever he's got, and he's hyping up the crowd, and everyone is freaking ready. And then Public Enemy decides they're not coming on. And you're just kind of sitting there, all hyped up, but not sure where to go, what to do next. Right? So there's value in it, absolutely. If you can create energy in a population, that's incredibly valuable. But what happens next is more important, most likely. Right? Well, obviously, perhaps. The idea, though, is that hype can change a moment. Giving someone purpose can change their life. Okay? Sometimes you need to hype people up to get them to go down that path, but purpose is what we're after. Maybe. Here we go. Okay, so educator purpose. Again, we said they might not always align, but eventually they'll overlap. So educator purpose, get the most out of those you work with. Reach for overall human development. And I think it's something we all try to do, inspire a person or group of people to accomplish something greater than they otherwise would have. That's our purpose, reaching toward overall human development. Athlete purpose is sometimes different, at least in the early goings. Okay, because the truth is, frequently, especially dealing in adolescent populations, the purpose, the reason they show up every day is to play under the lights, perhaps, or to win a starting role, or to win a championship. And there's a lot of talk about goal setting these days and reevaluating. No, we shouldn't have the goals there. We should prioritize this. Character is the thing. Well, if you tell a 14-year-old kid to show up to the weight room over a 9-month off season every single day, even in the bitter cold, walk through the dark, whatever, because I promise, just trust me, you're going to get better character. It's just not, that light at the end of the tunnel is just not bright enough for them. So when we do our character by design process, which is a workshop that we do with the Good Athlete Project, we very simply ask people what they want. There's no better driver than that, okay? And that top left slide, I got to tell you a little story about this. That was actually one of our first outings in San Mateo, California. We got off the plane. It was actually election day. It was the day of the election, so everyone's kind of scrambling. It was new stuff going on all over the place. We get off a plane. We show up at a charter school, and we enter a room where we're told we are going to be given 30 of their most disruptive students. And immediately I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm not afraid of disruptive students. I'm kind of leery about the fact that these kids have been dog-eared as their most disruptive. I've got maybe issues with that, but the kids who had most disciplinary issues were the most disruptive, were picked to come join our workshop, and they actually told us afterwards it was either us or Scared Straight. And I'm really glad they chose us, because there's actually plenty of good research about how kind of bogus the Scared Straight initiative is. There's no lasting benefit from it, no offense to those guys. But anyway, so we were called in, and the situation, I mean, it was almost like it was designed for us to fail. We're called into the situation. The first few kids show up, and we're high-fiving, like, oh, we heard you played football, and like all this stuff. And more kids start showing up, and they start to look around, and they're self-aware, so they realize the other kids that are in the room are also the ones that they also see in like detention and stuff like that, and they go, oh, shoot, are these cops? They're like, are we going to juvie now? And I swear this is true. And then we assured them we were not, but then we walked a mile through San Mateo County, just two of us and these 30 disruptive kids. Some of them are cutting through alleys and things like that, going to shake the hand of the guy who's smoking something behind the dumpster, and then coming back to meet the group, and this is all 100% true. Okay, so we walked a mile to the YMCA, and we're like, we're never going to get the ear of these kids. They're never going to listen to us. But they did, and it's because we started by asking them what they wanted, right? And here's these kids who are juniors and seniors in high school, brought up through this system, who love sports, most of them. These kids were nuts about soccer, but no one had ever asked them that before. Their entire educational system was a process of, here's how we do it. You show up, you shut up, you sit down, you don't move, herd off to the next class. Like I said, we walked a mile. This is a whole other issue that we could bring up, but they had no athletic facilities on campus. These kids they show up, sit for 8 hours, go home. Okay, and they were acting out a little bit and got tagged as disruptive. Anyway, I don't want to go down that path too much, but just asking someone what they want is an incredibly powerful way to motivate them. As long as they are being open and honest, I mean, there's your flame at the end of the tunnel. There's your light, right? And you can start there and then build accordingly. It's especially important now. Okay, it's especially important now. This mini computer, this phone I got up here, it's the most powerful thing in the universe, I feel like. And we are assaulted with options for everything we do. Convenience is omnipresent, and we have so many options for everything we do. And the goal initially for that was to make our decisions better and easier. But what we've come up with, essentially what we've developed unintentionally, is something called the paradox of choice. We have so many options that it becomes really difficult to select the right one. And this is even more important for the kids that we work with, right? Because they don't know a world that this hasn't existed in, right? So the paradox of that choice, the ability to just make a healthy decision once, requires a lot more cognitive load than we think it does, more probably than it ever has. And to imagine this in a pretty basic way, I want you to consider going into one of these massive mega grocery stores. The paradox of choice. When you enter this place, it will be filled with color, right? Colors, smells, sounds, new geographies of grocery stores. They literally are set up to like kind of herd you through them, right? Billions upon billions of dollars spent on marketing campaigns. This is an overwhelming environment if you don't have purpose. If you go into this thing without purpose, then you will roam around. Your eyes will be darting from one thing to the next. Whoever did the best marketing job will probably get your attention, and 2-3 hours later, maybe you walk out with a 3-pound bag of Skittles. And I'm not speaking from experience, but that is a very real possibility. I think we all acknowledge it. However, if you go into this place looking for a steak, like dinner is around the corner, okay? You go into this place looking for a steak. I'm not saying it's super easy. You still have to find your way to the steak, right? Maybe there's a few steaks to pick from, but you can guide yourself there. You can ask for support when needed. But entering this scenario with a purpose is absolutely essential to navigating what we now call the paradox of choice. So we got to give people direction. Okay, and I do prefer the term purpose or mission over goal because there's certainly more to it than that. I am a researcher, but I'm also a practitioner. Okay, and I want to make that super clear. I'm not stuffed away in a library somewhere reading books about this stuff. The first real big thing that we embarked on was a strength and conditioning program at a place called New High School just north of Chicago. The school has about 4,000 people in it. And we essentially set about on our mission. Right now I have a mission to get a functional clicker. No offense. There it is. It was our mission to provide a positively charged co-educational environment to enhance safety, both mental and physical, build character, and improve athletic performance. And it was broad, and it was early, and we were at the start of things, so we didn't know any better, but it seemed really right to us, and we truly, truly believed in it. We added a supplementary coach mission, which was to ensure the nutritious strength and conditioning environment is embedded with lessons and skills for overall human development, which include, quote, hearts to compassion, minds to inquiry, and lives to the service of humankind, which is actually the school's motto that we espouse. We thought it was a pretty good one. So after doing that, once we had identified that as our purpose and our mission, we started the build. And that build took us from 80 people. We had 80 people in a very small room to about 1,200 people. More than 1,200. Actually, there's an old slide. Just recently, we added some track and cross-country athletes. We're probably going to tip over 1,300. It's one of the biggest strength and conditioning programs at the high school level in the nation. We have a staff of 8 now, mostly part-time. And if anyone wants to talk after this about the build of a high school strength program, we are super passionate about that, and I'd be happy to do so. Anyway, we grew from 80 to more than 1,200, one guy in a room with a little desk he pulled in from the hall to a staff of 8. We continued to supplement our mission because we said, as part of the beginning slide, we wanted to have a co-educational environment. So we wanted to increase female participation. We are now more than 43% female, including crew, swimming at all sorts of levels, a female powerlifting team, et cetera. And then our kids were having great success on the field. We had, we've worked with the 3-time defending state champ girls soccer team, all sorts of teams, but we knew absolutely that wasn't us winning those games. That was the kids and the coaches who had done an incredible job. Before we got there, we were just supplementing that. We were trying to provide a service. But because we were a little bit competitive and wanted to figure out what we could do, we decided to compete, and we decided to compete in strength-based. If there is another clicker, I'd be super happy to have it. We tried to compete in strength-based activities, so we went to lineman challenges, tug of wars, whatever we could find, strength-based stuff, and we started to win. So we were really excited about the process that we had set up yielding these high-quality products. And then we even went a little further, started a powerlifting team. We won a 2015 state championship. And we won the NASA Junior Senior National Championship twice in the female division. Okay, again, trying to fulfill our mission of competitive excellence, co-educational environment, but also we mentioned, if you remember from that slide, service. So this group has also raised more than $50,000 in funds. They contribute back to the Infant Welfare Society all the time. Special Olympics and mental health awareness has become increasingly important to us. Again, not again, we got to keep going. Then we scaled out, okay, and I'm going to try to really run through this, but we scaled out because we're like, this is too good to leave on its own only in our place, let's give it to other people. We started the Illinois High School Powerlifting Association. This is a picture from our last state meet. We actually had a similar gym just up, and beside this one, we had 8 total racks, hundreds of lifters, but because we want to be true to our mission, we embedded that experience with fundraising between between squat and bench. We wrote a big check to Special Olympics. Between bench and deadlift, we wrote a big check to Embrace the Mental Health Foundation. We also highlight our girls state champions from Stagg High School and our Good Lifter All-State team, which includes not only performance, but community service and character-based criteria. So next, listen, I got to say, that was not for the sake of bragging. What I'm saying is these builds, these grand scale builds, these scalable models, these scalable positive experiences all start with a mission. You cannot get big unless your core is rock solid, unless you're, actually that's a pretty good metaphor for a strength conference. You cannot get big unless your core is rock solid. Planks. There you go. Who's seen this video? We're going to talk about feedback loops and a grading scale. Has anyone seen this video? Show of hands. Bad as I want to breathe. Okay, good. If you have not seen this video, is this playable or no? Not playable. Let me tell you about this video. Okay. If 40 million people have seen this video, the thing is, it's the most popular motivational video on the internet. And I'll give you the quick version, okay? So this guy's training through the entire video, explosions in the sky, this like kind of motivational music is playing in the background. And a gentleman comes out, he's talking to a group of young people, and he tells a story of a young man who wants to be successful. In his desire to be successful, he goes and seeks out a mentor, or in this story, a guru, okay? And the guru says, show up at the beach tomorrow morning. I'll show you exactly how I did it. They show up at the beach. They walk into the water slowly, deeper, deeper, deeper. He gets to his chest level, and the guru dunks him underwater. And he can't get out. He's struggling down there. All of a sudden, he pops up. He's like, what the hell just happened? And the guru looks back at him, and he's like, listen, until you want to succeed, as badly as you want to breathe, you will never be successful. Meanwhile, there's exciting music going on in the background. It's really an intense video. And I got to say, a supplementary story. When I'm from Chicago, and when it is -3 degrees out and dark out still, and I'm headed to my morning session, and my car is covered with snow, and I've got to scrape the ice off the car as it warms up before I can, drive through an hour of traffic to get to work. I listen to stuff like this, right? I'm a sucker for motivational videos. I listen to it. It is like jet fuel for me, okay? I don't have an issue with motivation. Thankfully, sometimes I have too much of it. I am the kid that's shaking before games. I'm the adult, actually, now that is still shaking before games. Sometimes I get so jacked up. But anyway, so I use this video. The back end of this video, or some of the lessons from this video include this. The speaker is challenging the audience for their desire to sleep more than they want to succeed. Tells these stories of, you're not willing to give up sleep. You want to succeed, but you're not willing to give up sleep. How about eating? Beyonce once went 3 days making an album. She looked up after 3 days, realized she hadn't eaten. Okay, I'm going to pause there. And after I show you the next few slides, I'm going to tell you why I think this is actually, and I hope I don't make any enemies on this, why this is actually one of the worst motivational videos on the internet. So, this is something we call, it's the framework to high-order performance. And by high-order performance, we are talking about a framework to get you to your personal best level in whatever it is you decide to do. You're going to see in a moment, it's super basic. But that could be cognitive performance, that could be academic, that could be physical, it could be strength-based, it could be performance-based on the field, whatever you want it. But high-order performance is the goal, and it's the peak of this framework. Okay, at the base level of this pyramid are 3 things. You must eat, move, and sleep. And that is true, okay? And I don't want to nerd out on this, but I can tell you it is an absolute of evolutionary biology that is true, okay? That is true. So we don't even need to go farther in that. If you don't take care of your nutrition, if you don't exercise and you don't rest, there's no, first of all, you might die. Second of all, high order performance is out of the question, okay? So those are really essential, and again, we could look at this from a number of perspectives, but I don't think we need to do anything more than personalize it. How many parents in the room? Are there any parents in the room? I am not a parent, but I've heard the rumors of the no sleep. Picture yourself in one of those settings. Picture going without sleep or with heavily interrupted sleep for a few days, right? Or picture an all-nighter in college. How good are you the next day? That's a really simple answer, right? Picture yourself eating Mountain Dew and Cheetos for 3 days if we want to look at nutrition. How good do you think you could possibly be? Right? So the anecdotes are all we need. It's a biological absolute, and we can talk about that, but the anecdotes probably are all that we need. The next step up this framework is language, communication, and relationships. Okay, it is an essential, right? Language, growth mindset has become a wildly popular term. We probably all use it in some way or other, whether we recognize it or not, but language is key, because the way you frame an experience determines what the experience is going to feel like. In many cases, that could appear in self-talk. That could be a peer-to-peer conversation. That could be sitting across a dinner table from somebody. But language is key. And in Carol Dweck's mindset research, she usually uses like math tests on younger individuals. But you can imagine this in your setting too. If you fail a math test, and your self-talk or the language or the discussion happening at recess is, well, Miss Carter doesn't like me, or that test was too hard, or I'm not good at math anyway, or when am I going to use this? If that's the kind of self-talk you're getting, if that's the kind of language you're using, you can predict the trajectory of that student's academic career. But if it looks more like, if the feedback loop suggests, let me go back and examine my process. Did I study enough? Miss Carter offered lunchroom study hours. I never took advantage of it. Maybe next time I can do that. You set people off on an entirely different trajectory because because language influences thought influences behavior, and repeated behavior, those are the habits that make you essentially who you are. Okay, so language is essential. Communication, relationships, we can keep going on this, but just trust me that this is the next step up. And without it is very difficult to be a high-order performer. The other truth of this is that once you have all that stuff, you run the risk of being comfortable. That's where we come in, okay? And motivate people to get to the next level of whoever they are, wherever they want to be, right? So how do you get people to the next level? You can't do it without those bottom steps, right? You have to acknowledge them before you move on. And that's essentially what we're talking about today. I added some things to this recently. I think it also has to be supplemented by mindfulness and morality. Okay, and when I say mindfulness, I'm not necessarily talking about lotus position Zen Buddhism practice, although I have nothing against that. I am talking about being just self-aware, conscientious, and mindful about the decisions that you're making. Mindful about what's being put into your body, and that's an increasingly complex level of mindfulness once you move toward high-order performance, but it's got to be practiced. It does not happen on accident. Morality is the other truth that we need to take fully into our hands. Okay? Because you can ramp somebody up, you can get them moving. And I want you to eat. I want you to eat to win, but I don't want you to take someone else's food to do it. And once we get to the high order performance, we're talking like, okay, let's go win a freaking championship. Let's go do this. But we're not going to slash the other team's bus tires to make sure that happens, right? So it is really important to embed some sense of morality into this conversation. Briefly, I'm going to go through the levels of motivation. We are all results-driven people, so don't take this too harshly if this doesn't come out the way you want it, but I would ask you that you all be open enough to at least consider it. Levels of motivation. 0 is pretty basic. It means the students that you are interacting with remain unmotivated. Unmotivated. An easy way to make sure that happens is not ask them what they want, but tell them what you want and tell them to get on your page and kind of hope for the best. 0 is students remain unmotivated. 1 is students are moved toward positive action. I think I assume that most people in this room are really good at that, right? We can get people going in the right direction. I think a lot of good coaches, good motivators can do this. Level 1 is move people toward positive action. Level 2 is students are moved toward positive action, but they've also been given actionable steps. Right? It's kind of like that, the public enemy, hyping people up and not telling them where to go or not bringing anything afterwards. Actionable steps have to come next. If someone says, okay, I'm on your page, I want to work toward this, I know nutrition is important, but what kind of stuff should I eat? Right? And when? And what quantity? Like, it's important that we give actionable steps. Okay, I'm with you, I want to sleep better, but how? Right? Moving in a positive direction with actionable steps. 3 is students move to act with actionable steps and support. That includes some kind of accountability, right? I'm not talking about support. I'm not talking about just the soft stuff. I'm not talking about everybody love everybody. I'm talking about accountability along their journey, right? These are the steps you take. Here's what happens when it goes well. Here's what happens if it doesn't go well. But add that to what you're doing. And in the bottom right, you can see the ultimate goal is that we get people supporting each other on this journey. Level 4 is students are moved to act with steps, support, and understanding. So not only are they pointing in the right direction, taking the right steps, they're being supported by their peers and their coaches, but they get why. They know why they're supposed to be doing these things. Equipping people with understanding is huge, and it's what high-level motivators do. And then this is when you really get to the point I chose crew, because this is when you really get to the point of reciprocal teaching. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. Teammate, and then you get to the real magic of camaraderie and teamwork. But level 5 is the one I think we should aim for if we're reaching for overall human development and optimization. Students have internalized the process of motivation. And I think if someone were to walk in right now and see only this slide, they might think, yeah, I've heard of internal motivation, I get it. There's external, there's internal, I get it. Okay, I'm talking about internalizing the process of motivation. I'm not talking about someone with natural drive. I'm talking about someone who kind of fulfills the criteria that we've been talking about. So they get it, and most importantly, they are able to transfer it. Does that make sense? So if we are talking about, just say basketball, you've taken all these steps in your aim of being the best basketball player you can possibly be. Okay? Someday your career is going to end. And if you can't transfer those abilities into the rest of the other areas of your life, and all that you've got is a shelf full of trophies, like, it's cool when, like, guests come over, but otherwise, who cares? Right? And I mean that, like, listen, I want trophies too, so I don't mean to diminish that idea, but that is what we're coaching for. We're coaching for transfer. All right, so why do I dislike this video? I said, like, as a guilty pleasure, I don't. I freaking love this video. But I dislike it because there's one reason that really gets to me. First of all, the bad is I want to breathe concept. There have been times where I wanted to be good at football more than most things in my life. But I didn't want it as bad as I wanted to breathe, okay? And there are very few things that I could even put on that level. Maybe if someone came at my mom, maybe, I don't know. But very few, and as much as I was obsessed with football, it probably wasn't one of them. So I think, and then furthermore, acknowledging that there's a spectrum of motivation. There's a lab, I believe it's out of Oxford actually now. Valerie Bennell is a researcher who's now gone to Oxford. She's got studies studying the neural pathways to motivation. Essentially, you receive some sort of stimulus, there's a network through the brain that interprets it and then produces a behavior. Some people have longer pathways to demonstration and motivation than others. Okay, it's a physical truth. So acknowledging that spectrum is the first super important thing to do. And then acknowledging that not everyone's going to feel things in the same way, and telling people what to feel on its own is super dangerous. If someone goes right, and you're like, no, dude, you're supposed to go left, you can coach the hell out of that. Okay? They went right, they were supposed to go left, let's work on why. Okay? If someone's not feeling the right way, that is a really difficult thing to challenge somebody on. Right? Going back to some of the cliches of coaching, the idea that if you're not jacked up for this game, check your pulse. It's just wrong. Okay? I get it. I think I've actually said it as a coach in my life. And like I said, I was the guy that resonated. I was jacked up. I was ready to go. But acknowledging that that at least half the population is not as jacked up as you, just acknowledging the spectrum of physical motivation, like, there's nothing they can do about it. And then they get this detrimental feedback loop where they start talking about, you start thinking about what's wrong with me, essentially. I don't feel this way, what's wrong? I don't get it. I don't understand the 100-year rivalry. This isn't resonating with me in the way that you think it would, coach. Anyway, so there's different pathways to motivation, and I'm sorry I go on tangents. I get really excited sometimes. Number two is it points people in an unhealthy direction. Okay, it points people in an unhealthy direction, and if we go back to that grading scale, it's actually a -1, because all the things that we talked about include pointing someone in a positive direction. And if you are moving someone toward negative action, no, that's no good. And all you got to do is reference this to understand why. And that's why we had to go through that conversation. Because essentially, if the most resonant components of your advice to kids include discounting the need to eat and sleep, some of the basic physiological needs, especially in adolescence. We do a lot of surveys, we talk to a lot of kids. They are not sleeping enough, especially the motivated ones. They just aren't, okay? And there's no such thing, let me tell you, because I believe all of you are motivated professionals too. This is a different conversation maybe, but none of you are good at not getting sleep, okay? You just get good at functioning at an impaired capacity. No one's good at not sleeping, right? It's just the truth. Anyway, so you take sleep and eating out of the equation, now you're degrading the structure of relationships, one's ability to communicate, the kind of language you're able to use. You take away any semblance of real mindfulness type practice, and morality starts to go too, because your decision making is incredibly impaired, and high order performance, there's almost no chance of it. The real issue with that is that you've just misled people, okay? It's a -1 on the scale, as we mentioned. But the other real issue is this feedback loop that you've created. So someone buys what you're selling, someone believes in you as their coach, motivator, mentor, and they do what you say, right? And they don't sleep for a couple days on end because they want so badly to be successful. All of a sudden they get to the end of this thing, not only have they not achieved what they hoped to, but they're sick, right? They're not functioning well in any way. Now you have kids start to, it's coming, Question the process. Okay? And that's especially detrimental in certain communities. For some of us guys, and ladies and gentlemen, sorry, I don't mean to keep saying guys, but for some of us, like, this is our one crack at certain kids. We've worked with a lot of those kids who will not sit still in history or bio, but they are at the gym every freaking day. They're at the gym every day, and they want to hear what we have to say. Okay? And if you give them faulty processes that make them sick and are based on cliche, not on facts and logic, they start to question the process. And once they do that, they're gone, unfortunately. You develop a negative relationship to work and close looking, you're sending that kid on a path that you shouldn't. And they also question you, right? I listened to this guy. He told me to make these decisions. These decisions led to negative instead of positive. Who is this person? So you take your feet right from under you without doing the front end work. Questions for the coach. If you don't know where you fall, ask yourself these questions. Super basic. In what direction are you pushing? You should be able to answer that question, right? It can be super broad, but you should be able to answer it. What are the steps on that journey? What are the actionable steps? What kind of support are you giving to your athletes? If you just show up 5 weeks later and said, dude, I told you to do this, why didn't you do it? That's not support. What kind of support are you giving? What are the opportunities for understanding in that environment? Weight room, we've got it made. You show up, you bring everyone together, explain what we're going to do, you do it and coach along the way, and then you debrief at the end. Not only what did we do, how did we do it, why did we do it, but can you feed that back to me? We ask our kids, our kids talk every day. They help explain the thing that has just happened, and they help project forward for us. And then what were your results? And this is the incredible part, because this is a positive feedback loop. What were your results? They were subpar. Just return to level 1. Okay, start the positive feedback loop. What direction are you pushing? Just reevaluate, ask yourself these questions. And if it's especially difficult for you, just ask the players. Where did we have you going? What were the steps? And if they can't answer it, we probably weren't doing enough on the front end. So character by design, I have 10 minutes to explain the most powerful character development program in the history of mankind and womankind. I'm just kidding. Also, I really like to talk. I'm super happy to do more of it. If anyone wants to meet up after this and get into specifics for your place, I'd love to. I'm not leaving till Sunday, so let's do it. Character by design, we mentioned paradox of choice. We mentioned entering an environment with a purpose. You probably all heard the essentials of goal setting, those being specific, measurable, time-bound, realistic, and actionable. This is the SMART goal setting, but I kind of reframed it. I took the acronym out and put the actionable last because it's the thing that we forget to do most regularly. So it's got to be actionable, specific, measurable, time-bound, realistic, and then we've got to create action steps to influence behavior. Do not worry about the 7 things up there. Again, this is a long build, but the basics are this. That superordinate goal, that thing that's hovering up the top, that's the thing that you ask it. You just say, what do you want? And you don't with no judgment, you just say, what do you want? And they tell you, okay? And then you say, fine, let's build for it. That's your superordinate goal, and I'm just going to kind of fast forward through the naming. Say the superordinate goal is a championship, and this is the one that we get more than anything else. We want to win. What are the components of that goal? Beat your big rival, win sectional, whatever it might be. You have to identify those sorts of things first. We want to win championship. What does that take? And then you start to self-reflect a little bit. Fine, we want to beat our big rival. What's that going to take? We got to be stronger. Okay, we got to lift. Okay, and you have this workshop where you essentially are asking the kids to give you these answers. You crowdsource ideas. You invite them to say whatever they want with no judgment. You can't be wrong if you're being honest. And then you help put this together for them. We are the ones facilitating this build. Lift, okay, what's our standard for that? We want 90% attendance in the off season. What's our behavior that's going to influence that? We got a group me account where we're all together and we're sending each other friendly reminders. Hey, make sure we get in the weight room today. Hey, I need a ride to the weight room or after practice or whatever it might be. But like I said, you ask the kids. You don't guess. You say, what are some ways that we have, or what are some ways we identified strength as one of our goals? What are the ways that we get stronger? Go. We usually put a 90-second clock on this and just have them, we call it a brain dump. And as basic as this might seem, the process, the character by design process was stolen from MIT teams of, undergraduates and graduate students at MIT trying to build rockets. Okay, so as basic as it sounds, it taps into a really essential and core and safe place in the human psyche where you can brain dump and then essentially puzzle this stuff back together. But it's all created by the kids. Another quick example, okay, we want to win sectional. We identified health as a primary idea. We want to sleep. We want to get 8 hours. This is a real one. No chocolate after dinner. This is one of those silly, it happened in real life. It was the most, the kid was, first of all, he's an animal on the football field. Totally honest, straight-faced, said, Coach, I don't get enough sleep. I think it's because I eat too much chocolate. After dinner, I just can't help myself. It's 10:30 and I'm still eating chocolate and I can't get to bed. So we identified that as one of his actionable behaviors, right? Totally authentic. You don't enter a space with that on your mind. This is the other cool thing about it is you get to ideas that you wouldn't have gotten to before. You don't go in and say, hey, we got exactly what you need. It's the no chocolate diet. It's going to help everything. No, we found that out by having conversations with kids. And if that seems complex, first of all, I would assure you that it's not. You can do it on a scrap piece of paper, draw some freaking circles. It's not a problem. We can send you templates if you want to do it in a more structured way too. But one of the things that we're doing in that build, in that process, is we're activating the premotor cortex. Okay? And what you're essentially doing is you are in that, just like that nightmare of decision-making possibilities, you are walking the kid through the behavior before he's confronted with the opportunity to make the decision one way or the other. So in that build, you're actually walking through with that student the turning down of the chocolate or the reminder on the group me or whatever it might be. And here's where the real kind of magic happens, okay? We talked about the difference between educators and athletes. Athletes want a championship. We want to create high-quality people. Here's the overlap. Everything from that down, you could say everything from the line up is kind of superficial. We all want it. It's fun, but it's kind of superficial. Everything from that line down should be fueling the framework to high-order performance like we talked about, okay? And you, as the designers of this environment, get to do that. Right? You get to make sure that the things that we put up on that board, okay, that they are fulfilling those promises, that we're promoting moral behavior, that we're promoting a mindful process, that we're promoting lifelong health and wellness strategies to our young people, that we're showing people how to communicate, how to be respectful, all those things that you want in your program, you do them right there. And then you confront people with this very real logic of, hey guys, you told me this is what you wanted. You said you wanted to do it to win a championship. I'm holding you accountable to that standard and none other. I swear this clicker is eating like 3 minutes at a time. I'm sorry. I got you. Okay? And this is the magic kind of question. Does your behavior match your goal? Does your behavior match your goal? Does your process match your purpose? Right? You just confront people with the very real logic that they have created, right? This is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. Why am I not? It's really an accountability standard that makes for incredible things. And I guess the last thing I will say, definitely feel free to reach out. But the last thing I will say about this is it's so poignant to me, and it's so especially important to me because it's just embedded in my life and my own development. I moved from the city of Chicago to the suburbs of Chicago. My first football practice, I came, it wasn't a terrible part of Chicago, but I could ride my bike to that end of the block and then that end of the block and back. As long as my parents could see me, I was fine, but I couldn't go any further. When I first got up to the burbs and went to my first football practice, the warm-up included running around a baseball backstop, and I couldn't do it. I'm telling you, I was out of shape. I was new. I was in this new place. I couldn't run around the backstop. I had to walk all the way back. I was embarrassed. I was in pain like I had probably never felt in my life. So my first purpose as an athlete was to get all the way back with the group, okay? And it slowly grew, and at the risk of sounding less than humble, I'll say it all of a sudden I was captain of my high school team, then I was two-time captain of my college team, and all of a sudden I was getting paid to play football, and it grew from there. And then I will say the transfer of that process led me to a place like Harvard. And this is if this were an infomercial, this is what I'd scroll, results not typical, but there's no chance I go to and graduate from Harvard if I don't play football, right? But referring back to that first slide, it doesn't happen automatically. I was very lucky to have good coaches and mentors and parents along the way. And I've now I've felt the benefit of it. Now it is my absolute charge to give it to as many people as possible. I hope you take the same one for yourselves. Feel free to hang around after. Thank you for being here. I'll see you at the conference.